So you want to try getting into Warframe. Whether it be through a friend's recommendation or just because you're bored, you decide to give this free game a shot just because. But maybe some of the mechanics aren't quite clicking with you, or you simply don't understand what the game wants from you. Well, let me be the one to tell you that you're not alone in feeling like this. Warframe has been around for 11 years and counting. And with so much going on in the game, it might be kind of intimidating for a newcomer to try to pick up and play. So I'm here today to give you some points on how to start, largely based on my own experience, and make no mistake, I'm not like a master of this game or anything. I take my time playing Warframe very casually, and I think that's how it's best experienced for the most part. And a lot of the points that I'll bring up will be very general. It was at least pivotal for me to enjoy the game, considering that I have picked it up and put it down several times, and only as of a couple years ago did I actually start playing it pretty seriously. So let me give you some layman's tips point for point, sort of help you on your journey. So I'd argue the first and most important point that I could make is finding somebody to play with. There's obviously a couple of ways you can go about this. Either having someone you know be a veteran of the game and have them sort of show you the ropes, guiding you along in your gameplay, and maybe giving you a hint of the cool stuff that you can unlock and otherwise work towards. Alternatively, there's nothing wrong with going in blind with someone else who also happens to not know how the game works. You won't have any guide necessarily, but even if you are just fumbling through something, doing it with somebody is a pretty good way to go about it. I have to mention though, that going into the game solo is not a good way to go about playing Warframe. If you know nothing about this, you can look up as many tutorials as you want to, there's just some stuff that's not going to make sense to you. Even something as simple as the modding for weapons and Warframes can be kind of intimidating if you don't know what you're looking at. And you won't if you're just starting the game. I think having some way to learn how the game works is pretty pivotal to your understanding and enjoyment of it. So what about if neither is an option for you? Well, this sort of ties into a sub-point that I want to make, and that would be the game's clans. Clans in Warframe work basically like guilds in other games, specifically in things like MMOs. Clans, in this game's respect, are particularly important because they lock behind some equipment you wouldn't normally have access to. And with that being said, I think it's pretty pivotal for you to join a clan pretty much regardless of what option you pick, with of course the tertiary way to finding somebody to play with being someone in the clan that recruited you to kind of show you how the game works. The Warframe community is typically very friendly, and super willing to help out new players a lot of the time. And as the game stands, if you want to look for more content that's ready to be accessed, then look no further than joining a clan. I think talking about all of the systems involving a clan is kind of not conducive to an entry-level understanding of the game, so naturally I won't be going too into it. But just know that there's a lot to look forward to if you join somebody's clan. Players have the ability to freely customize the game space inside of a clan, and amenities need to be unlocked in order for you to gain access to some of this extra content such as other weapons and other Warframes. Unlocking this content from the get-go kind of goes into another point that we'll get to later, but just to kind of touch on it a little bit, let it be known that starting a clan isn't exactly a great idea if you're just starting out. It's a lot of resource gathering and waiting that you have to do in order to get all the amenities for your clan. And ideally, your entire clan would sort of work as a team in order to get all the amenities sort of figured out. So if you're making one just by yourself and don't have anybody to join in with, then it can obviously be an issue for sort of hard gating your progression in that way. So yeah, probably just join one. And like I said, you would probably want to anyway, even if you had somebody to play with prior to starting the game, whether they would be a newcomer or a veteran. And the recruiting chat section is always looking for new people to play with. So whenever you feel like it, just go ahead and throw your name out there saying you're looking for a clan. My next point is to hammer home that this game really is free to play. What you're likely to notice immediately as sort of a red flag is the platinum currency that's in the game. Make no mistake, this is a premium currency, but it can be earned by trading. This is going to sort of tie into the largest barrier to entry for people, and it's to basically involve yourself in the game's community a little bit. Even if you're the most socially inept person, it still benefits from you to be able to engage with the game's trading system at the very least. When you first start your account, you'll have 50 free plat to start with, but this plat cannot be traded. It's basically used to buy things in the in-game market or to speed up building processes in the game. And in this way, it's a little bit more liquid. You're allowed to do whatever you want with it just because it has some limitations associated with it. I will say wholeheartedly that Platinum is pretty pivotal to your journey as a Warframe player. There are certain limitations the game imposes on you that simply require the use of Plat in order to bypass. And without really thinking about it, it can come off as rather annoying. But thankfully, as it stands, the prices for things like weapon slots, for example, really aren't that expensive, and it's not a huge issue to get a couple extra, even if you are a new player. While it is rather easy to fork over a couple bucks to get some platinum, it's even easier to go through certain systems to get materials in order to trade with other players. The quickest go-to way to make plat is relic farming. This is essentially a system that lets you randomly get materials in order to build prime versions of whatever equipment that already exists in the game. This system already kind of feeds into sort of an infinite feedback loop. Whenever you pop open a relic, you don't necessarily get to choose what comes out of it, but if you have multiple people also running relic popping, then you can choose amongst their relics to also grab, and it'll give you a copy of whatever they pop. Even if you get absolutely nothing that you wanted, you can still use it to turn into platinum for trading. Also for ducats, but that's not really for a discussion for here. Let me also take this opportunity to mention a really neat third-party software that people particularly savvy in trading like to use called Warframe.market. This is basically a network where people can post trades for whatever they're selling and or buying. It's a really good way to compare and get fair prices on something you're looking for, or something you're looking to sell. I also highly advocate for the third-party software known as Frame. It connects with Warframe.market and interfaces with it, allowing you to see trades without having to open a window. You can choose to have it launch at the same time your game launches and just have it as something sort of off to the side you can look at whenever you want to do trades. It has a bunch of other neat features too, things like a collection list for your weapons and warframes and an active UI screen to look at your current inventory and what you need to complete for sets of weapons or warframes or whatever else have you. It's stuff like this that makes me really wish that it was a part of the game as a whole, but at least somebody made something for it. It makes this whole process really streamlined and really simple, and I don't know anybody who doesn't use it religiously in order to make platinum. And if for whatever reason you're a returning player or veteran player looking at this video for whatever reason and don't know about these, then I'll have them linked in the description. I guess also if you're a new player and you just want those resources immediately, then yeah, they're there. A premium currency in any free-to-play game can kind of seem like a daunting red flag, but out of all the systems to incorporate it, I think Warframe does it really well. It's not the best and I have my complaints with it, but if you want to know personally, I haven't spent any money in this game at all, other than buying a skin for real money for one of my weapons, which, because it was a design made by a fan, it actually directly supported that fan. So, you know, I did it for the sake of cosmetics, and I think it was like $5, so playing the game for years, I've only spent $5. Like, really not that big of an issue. But with that being said, if you just absolutely can't interact with people that you've never met before, then maybe this isn't necessarily the game for you. Platinum is integral, so is having a dojo, and with those two aspects sort of combined, if you don't want to deal with those at all and literally can't bring yourself to do it, then there's no other way for me to say this other than I guess Warframe just isn't for you. But if you don't mind that, or don't mind interacting with just a little bit, even if you are pretty supremely introverted, then you can still get away with that. My third point is going to involve the progression of Warframe. It's notably pretty slow. The game itself focuses on optimizing and moving as fast as possible to get done with the missions, and that part of it is fun. What might not be so fun is the game basically throttling you in order to wait for things to be built in your foundry, for instance. New weapons and Warframes can take several hours and sometimes days to even get completed. Similarly speaking, the leveling mechanic in this game is referred to as mastery. Taking a mastery test involves you taking some sort of simulated mission and completing it in order to ascend to that next level. You can only take one of these once a day, and failing it means that you have to wait another day in order to do it. This is extremely punishing sounding, but in a weird way I kind of like how it works. Calling the leveling system mastery means that it has a certain weight to it, and how Warframe handles it kinda warrants that weight. When you see somebody who's level 30 or higher, and you understand how long that can roughly take, it's one of those instances where you can kind of go, wow, this guy has been playing for a really long time, that's crazy. As opposed to something like a more traditional MMO where it's like, man, this dude's been just no-lifing the whole time. No, they've been no-lifing too, it's just they do that, and then they also kind of just know more than you and have an understanding and mastery, literal mastery, that you don't have. And that's kind of neat, it's sort of awe-inspiring. You can sort of couple this in the game's general gameplay and sense of movement. Somebody who's higher level is naturally going to be more efficient in movement and fighting. And completely through the nature of just their experience, you'll be able to see that within a person. If you decide to stick with the game for long enough, you too will have this level of mastery. And I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool. Because of how Warframe decides to handle its leveling and progression, it sort of makes this unique environment where the levels actually matter on a fundamental level. Make no mistake, having to wait is definitely really lame. And my only real counter to this, for as lame as it's gonna sound, is basically just pace yourself. No one's necessarily asking you to play every day. Play for every hour in the day. If you need to, take a break for 10 minutes, an hour, a week, a year if you need to, and then just come back to it whenever you're ready. pick up the game again whenever some sort of timed event is happening. That's fine. If you miss it, it'll roll back around the next year. At least it does typically anyway. Having to sort of wait and take your time with some of these mechanics can come off as pretty meh to somebody, really to most people who see that initially. But I've learned to live with it. I think it's kind of a cool system, and there's not really any other game that's done that. It adds a real weight to the levels and the progression, like I said, and I don't know, I just think it's kind of cool. I understand it's not exactly everybody's cup of tea. Point 4, I actually really like the story of the game. I think most people do. For me personally, I didn't start getting invested in it until basically I was Master Rank 8. So I think in that way it's probably a good gauge to pretty much tell you that you don't need to be paying attention to what's happening until Mastery Rank 8. Of course you can if you want to, but like, I kinda see Warframe's story as something will hook you and make you want to care about it. It has cool little story implications early on in the game, and if you do happen to notice it as you're going along in your journey as a Tenno, then you're kind of rewarded for seeing what the story implications play out later on. This is gonna seem like a super minor thing, just talking about, hey, the story is good, but if you want a narrative to help kind of tie together your adventure, then Warframe's got it. Which I can't say the same for most free-to-play online games, honestly. And I'm not gonna talk about any of the story because why would I do that? This is an introductory video. So anyway, my final point is going to involve the equipment itself, and basically its relation to you as a player. Largely speaking, you're allowed to use whatever you like. There's a lot of weapons and warframes in this game. A lot of options for the players to do whatever they want, and often you want different options for different missions they're going to be taking on. The borderline super saturation of all this equipment means that everyone's going to be using something a little bit different. There's obviously meta picks all across the board, but you don't have to do any of that. If you have the resources to be able to use something and have it fit your niche and your playstyle, then go ahead and do it. You can do it with anything. I personally like dual-wielding assault rifles that have ridiculous fire speeds and make my camera go up into the ceiling immediately because I think it's funny and satisfying. But alternatively, you might like the shotgun that fires so many pellets that bounce around in the room that it causes other people's game to lag. Even if a weapon or a warframe is on the weaker side, there are ways to fix it and sort of make it come into its own as a viable option. Specifically with weapons, you have Riven mods, which are a whole thing and are unlocked at Mastery Rank 8. And without getting too much into that, Rivens basically have random stats that you can roll that fundamentally change the weapon. It could be something as simple as more attack damage, and something as weird as like projectile size, or maybe projectile flight speed. Just all kinds of stuff, and you can get some like absolutely ludicrous results out of it if you want to focus on that. Warframes, similarly, can be put into different roles depending on things like their armor, their health, and what abilities they have. Pretty bog standard stuff like your support types and damage dealers, but other fun options too. There are ways to make you unkillable or leech health off of enemies. There's mixes and hybrids between archetypes, and just an infinite number of crazy stuff that you can find. Odds are if you're looking for something in specific, you'll probably find it because there's just so much here. Need I remind you, the game has been around for 11 years already, and there's only one or two pieces of equipment that are outright bad. There's over 50 warframes, hundreds of weapons to choose from, and in all this variety, you're likely to find a couple of things that you really like. Warframe is a game with a lot of history behind it, and a player base that also matches that history, I think. It's certainly not for everybody, but I think especially if you don't have anything better to play, you might as well give a free game a shot. There are certainly worse free-to-play options, and if you want to go for something entirely different, then why not give this one a shot? They're gonna have a new expansion to the game content here in a little bit, and with that, it might be a good time to jump in and see if you like the game any. I've certainly had a lot of fun over the years, and yeah, hopefully with these tips under your belt, you can go into Warframe a little bit more headstrong now. For me though, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Hope y'all liked it, and if I missed anything, then let me know in the comments. And yeah, subscribe too, that would be cool.